Well, good evening, Vacaville, and welcome to the Tuesday, May 18th meeting of the City of Vacaville Planning Commission. Before we formally start the meeting, there is a script that I want to read through to remind everyone of how we conduct business tonight. I'm certainly hoping that we have the ability to see the future when we will be meeting in person rather than over these Zoom conferences. But in the meantime, here we go. Good evening, and we appreciate everyone who's participating in tonight's Planning Commission teleconference meeting. The meeting is being conducted pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N29-20, and we appreciate your bearing with us as we attempt to use the remote tools. We make a point of, if we need to, slowing down to make sure that everyone can participate in the meeting. And if there's moments of dead air, it's while we're waiting to make sure the participation can occur. Tonight's meeting can be viewed live on the city's website, which is www.cityofvacaville.com, or on cable channel 26. Instructions to participate from a computer are provided on the website, cityofvacaville.com, and you can connect to the meeting by the link that's listed on the agenda. If you're following along on the telephone and prompted for a participant ID, please press the pound sign to be connected. If you are planning to participate, please follow along on the telephone, not on channel 26, because there is a broadcast delay on channel 26. Callers who wish to comment can raise their hand by pressing *9 on their phone. And depending upon your individual settings, you might also need to press *6 after you're unmuted by the host in order to unmute yourself on your phone. And computer users can request to speak by raising the raise hand button on their Zoom controls. So that's the script we have for this evening's meeting. And the first thing we do is we call the roll. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll?
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Chair McCauley.
Here.
Vice Chair Fortney.
Here.
Commissioners Aldridge.
Here.
Beaumont.
Here.
Brecken.
Here.
Klein.
Here.
And Lightfoot.
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. If you would all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and I hope I'll be able to join you in person the next time we do that. We'll see how the schedule goes. Communications, Madam Secretary or Acting Director Baderi, do we have any communications?
We have no communications this evening.
Thank you very much. Item number 4 on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Are there any commissioners who wish to propose a change to the agenda as presented?
Yes.
Commissioner Beaumont will move to approve.
Wait. I think Commissioner Brecken was asking for a change. Go ahead, Wendy. Did you want to change the agenda?
Yes, on page 2 of the minutes under air quality, the last
Hold
line.
on. Wait. That's the change to the minutes would be under item 6.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're just approving the agenda. So anyone else wish to change the agenda? If not, I believe that we had a motion from Commissioner Beaumont. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, so Commissioner Aldridge got the second in. Secretary, would you call the roll on the approval of the agenda?
Commissioners Aldridge.
Yes.
Beaumont.
Yes.
Brecken.
Yes.
Klein.
Yes.
Lightfoot.
Yes.
Vice Chair Fortney.
Yeah.
Chair McCauley.
Yes. Thank you. Our next item is item number 5, which is business from the floor. This is a time to address the commission with issues that are not on tonight's agenda, but that are within the commission's subject matter jurisdiction. And we limit speakers to 3 minutes per speaker or group of spokespeople per the government code and the Vacaville Municipal Code. So looking at our list of call-in attendees, I do not see any hands that are raised. Madam Secretary, do you see anyone seeking to address us from business from the floor?
I see no one.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and close business from the floor. Now we come to the consent calendar. This is one or more items that are handled as a single item. The only item on that is the minutes from our previous meeting. I believe that Commissioner Brecken had a series of corrections to that were sent out to the commission members previously. Commissioner Brecken, did you want to go over those individually or simply ask for action with the commission or with the changes you had recommended?
I can just ask for the changes I recommended and motion that they be approved.
Hey, do we have any additional changes to the minutes that any commissioner wishes to propose? Seeing none, we have corrections from Commissioner Brecken and a motion to approve the minutes as amended. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Klein has a second. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Saldridge,
Yes.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Brecken,
Yes.
Klein,
Yes.
Lightfoot,
Aye.
Vice Chair Fortney,
Yeah.
Chair McCauley.
Yes. We will now move to item number 7, which is the public hearings. We have 2 items. The first item is an ordinance related to cannabis businesses. Before we go on to the staff presentation, I want to note to the commissioners that because of the amount of potential community interest in this, but the wide variety of things related to cannabis and the fact that we are dealing simply with the land use and development code issue of it, I'm going to exercise the chair's priority to run this meeting a little more tightly than I normally do. I'm going to make sure all of our public comments are limited to 3 minutes. And I'm going to ask that any and all comments come to the chair so I can properly make sure that they're within what is on the item so that we're staying within the Brown Act and that we direct to the proper person for the answer on that. So just a little bit of a heads up before we go on to this item. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to staff for the presentation. Who is making the presentation?
That would be myself. Oh, sorry.
Introduce Senior Planner Christina Love. She'll be making the presentation. She's joined by the other members of the team working on the cannabis regulations, David Nam, Deputy City Attorney, and Don Burris, the Director of Economic Development Services. And Christina, go ahead.
And I will quickly note, commissioners, if you wish to ask a comment, let's do it during the presentation so we can deal with it directly. But with that in mind, Christina, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Chair and Commission. This will be a rather lengthy presentation. I realize it's been quite a while since we've brought any cannabis-related business to Planning Commission. There's been quite a few presentations at Council, so I'm going to try to succinctly and briefly kind of explain what we're doing and why we're doing it, and kind of some of the background as to why we're here. Next slide, please. So the purpose, generally, so Planning Commission is responsible for reviewing and making decisions or recommendations, as tonight's case would be, based on land use matters. So we're here at City Council's direction to present some amendments to the Land Use and Development Code that create regulations for cannabis businesses. This is linked to a regulatory ordinance that will be going before Council next month, and that's Chapter 9.13, which was provided in your packets as kind of some additional information. Next slide, please. So also, one of the attachments I included in your packet is the lengthy history of all the items and activities that the city has done, both study sessions as well as ordinances and adoptions and meetings, a plethora of things that we have been doing over the last few years. Briefly, just to bring you up to where we are today, so in 2017, the city did adopt a temporary moratorium prohibiting all cannabis activities. That was right after the cannabis ordinance, the cannabis state law went into effect, and the city at that time was not ready to figure out how we were going to deal with cannabis within the city. So we created this temporary moratorium. The following year, the council approved regulations for personal cannabis. The year after that, or about 6 months after that, the city council repealed the temporary moratorium and replaced it with a new chapter 9.13, which is the current prohibition on cannabis activities and cannabis businesses. Last year, council placed a cannabis tax on the November election ballot, and that tax did pass. So after that, council kind of reanalyzed their decision process on the cannabis, commercial cannabis in Vacaville. And so at council's request, staff last month on April 27th presented updates to the city council on the cannabis industry within California and sought direction for potential regulations. And that their direction was to move post haste, move quickly, which brings us here tonight. Next slide, please. To give you, before I get into the land use piece of it, I understand there's a lot of cannabis, the cannabis industry is kind of complicated and there are a lot of moving pieces and moving parts. So to generally explain how we get to the land use permit process of it, I wanted to back up a little bit and explain what the general process is overall. It is, and I realize it seems bizarre, but I refer to it as a two-step, three-part process for commercial cannabis businesses. That first step being the regulatory permit process, which is chapter 9.13, that will be reviewed by city council. That is part one of step one. That's done parallel to the second part, which is the state licensing process, which of course is done through the state. This regulatory permit process from the city is tied to the owner and operator of the business. It is in any council approval for a regulatory permit is conditional on the approval of the land use permit. So essentially this permit runs with the business. Step two, once that permit is obtained, step two would then be that business then comes in, the owner operator comes into planning to apply for the land use permit. And that's the part that's administered by community development. Planning Commission, we're proposing that this is a conditional use permit. So Planning Commission has the authority to review and approve conditional use permits. The land use process focuses on the physical site location and the site design. And it would result in a land use permit that's tied to where the business is. So it runs with the land. The reason why I make sure to differentiate that is business operators sometimes change, businesses sometimes move. So those processes are done separately to be able to make it run more smoothly. Sounds weird, but the other jurisdictions have had some very good luck. This is very similar to what most jurisdictions in California are doing. Next slide, please. So City Council direction specifically for the Land Use Development Code section of it. They wanted staff to create regulations that allow storefront businesses in general commercial zoning to allow non-storefront, micro-business, manufacturing, distribution, and laboratory testing facilities in industrial and business park zoning, to include buffers and identify sensitive land uses that defer to the state defaults. And this is generally, so I'll get into more detail within the coming up slides. This default is the same as over half of what California jurisdictions have adopted. So council kind of decided to kind of stick with that plan. Additionally, there are some security measures that are required. Next slide, please. And more specifically to the land use regulations that you won't see in the regulatory regulations or the regulatory permit are parking requirements, aesthetic review, landscaping, fencing design, Could also include building design and site compatibility. Next slide. Getting into what those business types are. So at the state currently, there are 22 types of state licensing available. General categories can break down into the commercial aspects, which are retail, sales, storefront or non-storefront, nursery, and special events. You also have more of the production side of it, a little bit more industrial almost, cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, micro business, and then you have kind of the no man's land of the testing laboratory. Next slide, please. Cultivation is what it sounds like. They're growing and cultivating the plant itself. There's indoor and outdoor categories. This was not a recommended use by staff or by the consultant. The reason being that as the consultant presented to council, the industry in California has more supply than the demand can actually keep up with. So based on that, the professional recommendation of the consultant was to not, the cultivation, it doesn't have the economic value that most cities are looking for. And so to not be involved in it is the best way to go. So staff recommended prohibiting cultivation, and city council did agree with that. So what you see part of the land use development code does prohibit cultivation. Next slide, please. Storefront retail. This is a license in of itself. So as you may recall, there is non-storefront and storefront retail. Storefront retail specifically is what it sounds like. It's a business that can literally open its doors. Customers can come into the business and or they have the ability to do delivery. The delivery aspect of it can be limited. So the pro on storefront retail is potential economic benefit, as you see here, with limited locations to promote better control and access to access to products, but also to reduce the internal competition. Cons are that there may be a potential for increased property crimes in the immediate area that can be mitigated through security measures, through site design, and especially even more so mitigated when it is in a commercial area, which leads to why staff here recommended that storefront retail be allowed in large commercial centers. Initially, we recommended doing it in neighborhood commercial zoning and general commercial zoning. The reason being the consultant as well as staff have experienced from other jurisdictions that the idea of isolating even storefront retail to industrial park areas creates an isolated location. So both the businesses as well as customers suffer in not feeling safe in such an isolated location. So having a storefront retail inside an existing shopping center increases the feeling of safety and can also increase the sense of control that a business can have. As such, through continued conversation, council did actually recommend that storefront retail be allowed only in general commercial zoning. So that is what is being presented to you this evening. Next slide. So I have a few different types of maps specifically related to the storefront commercial zoning areas. This first one you see is a little bit zoomed in. What you see there in red are general commercial neighborhood or general commercial zoning. And we identified some of the shopping centers as an example of what a 600-foot buffer looks like. So as I mentioned, the state does recommend a 600-foot buffer for sensitive receptors that can include schools, daycares, youth centers, any youth-oriented facility. Staff recommended the 600-foot because, one, it was recommended by state. It's also more than half of the California jurisdictions follow this default standard. But additionally, staff recommended this because so staff did share with council that we have the ability to increase this buffer or to decrease this buffer. This is not a set standard. There is some wiggle room should the local jurisdiction choose to make a different finding. Staff did recommend sticking with the default and at least not increasing it, because increasing it, as you can see here in these samples, this is a 600-foot buffer. To increase it more than that would effectively prohibit and significantly reduce quite a few possible locations for these retail businesses to operate in. If you go to the next slide, please. So this is our zoning map. This is a clipping of our actual zoning map that's online. Again, in the red is all of the general commercial zoning. One of the major sensitive uses that's been identified as really the main focus are schools. Schools typically in Vacaville are inside the community facilities zoning district, which is depicted here in blue. Could you go to the next slide, please? Here you can see I've identified with all the different icons where schools are located. So if there's a 600-foot buffer from any general commercial area, and I do apologize, I see there's a school right smack dab in the center in the downtown area that I did not highlight in pink, but there's a school there as well. But with the 600-foot buffer from any commercial area, and the buffer is also measured from the property line, not from the individual tenant location. So with that kind of buffer, quite a few locations are already not permitted, or that a cannabis use could not go into because they're so close to a school. So that for those reasons, that's why city staff recommended a 600-foot buffer. And after conversations, council, as I said, council agreed with the 600-foot. Next slide, please. Moving into manufacturing. So I'm going to get more into what we identify a little bit more of an industrial type uses. Manufacturing is, as it sounds, means it can compound, blend, extract, infuse, or otherwise make or prepare cannabis businesses. This can also include bakeries. So have some economic development opportunities, especially in the edibles industry. Potential health risks or safety concerns, because some of the processes can include volatile substances. However, those substances are all controlled and have required safety regulations, so that and with regulations and safety protocols that can be decreased. Not much different than biotech industry. Land Use and Development Code currently allows manufacturing in industry and industrial and business park zoning. And for general consistency, staff recommended that cannabis manufacturing then also be allowed in the summer type zoning. And staff or council agreed with that. Next slide, please. Similarly, distribution operations, as they sound, they distribute cannabis for various reasons, whether it's they can bring it, transport it to the labs, they can transport it to and from the stores. They are responsible for making sure that the product is good quality and that packaging and labeling is proper. Benefits can include, again, economic benefits. Does require freeway access, and we do have 2 different freeways to be able to access, which is pretty unique and special for a town like us. There is a greater risk of crime, as there can be larger amounts of cannabis on site. And there is a potential for noise and traffic concerns with such as a large volume of heavy trucks moving back and forth. But again, especially where it comes to concerns of risk of crime, security measures can mitigate some of those. As I mentioned, similar to what industrial and business park zoning allows. So for that reason, staff recommended distributors to be a conditional use in industrial and business parks, and council agreed. Next slide, please. Testing laboratories. They test the product. Kind of the least impact as far as safety concerns, poses few safety challenges, very low profile, generally often not noticeable. Possible increase from traffic as deliveries for testing samples are frequent, and possible concerns of waste issues. However, laboratories laboratories can be similarly compared to the biotech industry or any other manufacturing type of industry that has any kind of waste. And so there are protocols and measures that they have to follow as well for such waste. And so that can be mitigated through proper site design. And for that reason, staff also recommended that laboratories be a conditional use in industrial and business parks. I will mention, because it was mentioned at City Council, the idea of research facilities, and similar like biotech research facilities, or in this case, cannabis research facilities. We did not, that particular use is not identified as a licensed type or a licensed business in the state. So we didn't call that out as a separate use. We would consider that to be the same type of a use as the biotech and the medical research facilities that we currently have within the industrial and business park zoning. So they would go under that kind of a use. Next slide, please. Retail non-storefront. So this is your delivery only business. Staff recommended that this be in the industrial and business park zoning only, largely because experience has shown that delivery only business.
My therapist.
I will thank you for whoever was speaking and then muting. Again, everyone, if you're not actually making a presentation, please make sure that your microphone is muted.
Sorry about that. So non-storefront, they typically have large fleets of vehicles. And for that reason, they're going to take up also a significant amount of parking. Parking in an industrial area, you're kind of expected to have large fleets of vehicles, especially if it's a delivery or distribution kind of a use. So having that kind of use inside commercial areas, not real conducive to a reciprocal parking type of arrangement. So for that reason, staff recommended non-storefront delivery only businesses to be in industrial and business parks. Next slide, please. The last kind of use that that is part of our presentation is the micro business. The micro business is essentially described as an all-in-one. The state requires that at least three of four types of businesses be included in such a micro business. Those options can include cultivation, manufacturing, and distribution of whether it's storefront or non-storefront. Going back to the cultivation discussion, with the recommendation that cultivation be prohibited in Vacaville, that effectively reduces the micro business to being able to have manufacturing, distribution, and retail. And additionally, with manufacturing and distribution being more of an industrial type of a use, the retail aspect, staff recommended be limited to the non-storefront retail, so the delivery only aspect of it. Share these recommendations with council and they agreed. So micro business is proposed as being manufacturing, a distribution, and a non-storefront option only. Next slide, please. So this is a map that identifies the industrial parks. We have 2 industrial zonings, and those industrial areas are identified there in gray. And they're also governed by policy plans, the Interchange Business Park and the Golden Hills Business Park. And then our business park zone is governed by the Vacaville Business Park Policy Plan. which is why in the rather lengthy ordinance that you have, it lists policy plans. There are some that are identified in the commercial areas, like the nut tree commercial, as was shown in one of in the previous map. The nut tree park policy plan would allow conditional use for storefront retail. So we're proposing in these particular business parks that, or policy plans, I'm sorry, that the identified industrial type uses be allowed as conditional uses in these policy plans. Next slide, please. Sql action, as with every land use action, there is a Sql action that is required. This particular zoning amendment and new ordinance is currently covered under a statutory exemption identified by what's commonly called MCRSA. It's the compilation of cannabis state laws, specifically in business in BPC 26055 Part H. There's an exemption for the adoption of any ordinance, rule, or regulation, which is what we're requesting here, an ordinance for the Land Use Development Code, by a local jurisdiction that requires discretionary review and approval of permits, licenses, and other authorizations to engage in commercial cannabis activity. So this is an ordinance to create those permit approval processes for cannabis activities. So it's statutorily exempt. Next slide, please. So with that, get to the recommendation. So staff is recommending that Planning Commission recommend that the City Council of the City of Vacaville approve the proposed draft ordinance to amend Chapter 14.02.016. I do apologize, I didn't mention that. That is the definitions section. So we incorporate the definitions I went through with you as to what these different types of uses are and what a cannabis business is. So those definitions become part of the Land Use and Development Code. And then also to adopt a new chapter of 14.09.140 titled Supplemental Standards, Cannabis Businesses, in addition to the policy plan amendments related to cannabis businesses. That is the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Christina, for a thorough presentation. For the members of the public who are watching, we'll go to the public comments in a bit, but after the staff presentation, we give the commissioners an opportunity to ask questions to clarify information that staff may have gone over. Then we go to public comment, and after that, when we close the hearing, we start coming up with comments, any proposed changes, and the commissioner's opinions. But at this point, I'm going to open it up for questions from the commission. I see Commissioner Brecken's hand is up. Wendy, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the ability to ask questions. I'm going to just ask one main question now, and I'll reserve my other comments to later. But I'm confused, and maybe this is a question for counsel, for the attorney. Staff presented that the City Council had directed that storefronts be used for retail. And so my question has to do with what discretion does the Planning Commission have to suggest an alternate, such as the industrial area? The City Council did not vote on this direction. It just seems to be casual comments. And the mayor had an inconsistent comment. He stated that that he did not believe storefronts for the sale of cannabis would be appropriate, and he believed that maybe the industrial area sales in an industrial area would be better. So again, my question is, what is the Planning Commission's discretion in this area?
Would David or Andrea like to handle that one? And Wendy, thanks for that. Go ahead and put your hand down, and we'll ask for staff to address, and then I'll see if you've got a follow-up. Who from City Attorney would like to handle that?
Thank you for the comments, David Nam, Deputy City Attorney here, and I will handle that as Ms. Borba is actually there to advise the Planning Commission. And actually, since that is related to a land use question, I'm going to defer to the planners if I may.
Yes, the acting director Buderi. So the Planning Commission could certainly recommend additional features in the ordinance or differences in the direction that the staff felt they received from the council in drafting an ordinance. It is certainly a topic you could discuss as your part of your discussion on what you would like to recommend to the city council.
Thank you. So it does appear that that is within our jurisdiction, and we can talk about it further as we go forward. Commissioner Klein, you have a comment or a question. Go ahead, Brandon.
Thank you. I just want to clear, first of all, thank you for that terrific presentation. I thought it flowed very well, Christina. I do have a question about the time frame for how this all sort of flows up, because my understanding is that there is a sunset provision in Mount Cursa, section 26055H, subdivision H, that gives us till July. For regular people, that might seem like, you have a lot of time, but I understand that this all has to flow just right. So what's the very latest that we would be able to push this if we wanted to have a little more time to study this issue? Thank you.
Mr. Buderi, it sounds like that's back to you. Go ahead.
So to take advantage of the time frame for the exemptions from CEQA provided by the state's initial adoption of laws related to adopting ordinances, the Planning Commission, or rather the City Council, would need to take action on the ordinance in the month of June. And that would be so that their action was taken before a July 1st sunset of that particular part of the state law that provides the CEQA exemption that Christina mentioned. So that being the case, the providing for the time limits that go along with typical public noticing for public hearings, an action by the Planning Commission tonight would enable the ordinance to be considered by the City Council at their June 8 meeting.
So Fred, that sounds like if we have changes that we would like to propose, we need to develop those and put the language into any action we take tonight, rather than asking it for it to be brought back at a later date. So commissioners, just if there's changes you'd like, be thinking now about how you would like to phrase those so that when the time comes to take action, we have specific wording to use. And with that, I'll ask if there's any other commissioners who wish to ask questions at this time. And I don't see any hands up, so I am going to open the public hearing. Again, a reminder that what's in front of us tonight is the land use ordinance portions of it, and not some of the other items that the council has. Those have been pointed out. There's a lot of interrelationship between them. We do limit comments to 3 minutes, and with that, I'm going to ask, I see there are 5 attendees, and someone with a phone number that ends in 211 has raised their hand. So if the secretary will go ahead and open that, we can take our 3 minutes of comments from that individual. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Alicia Minion, and I just have a quick question. I heard the state recommended 600 feet from, for example, a school. And I was wondering if the city staff had reached out to the school and asked if they were okay with the 600 feet. And so I know we have Vacaville Unified, we have a charter school, and I was just curious, if you reached out to the school, and what was their response or reaction to the 600 feet proposed requirement? Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Did anyone from staff have the ability to talk? Did we reach out to the school district and see, did they find this adequate, too much, not enough, don't have an opinion? Mr. Baderi, I think I'll probably ask you to respond to that one. Did we reach out to the district on this issue?
I'd have to defer to the project team to see if there were any direct conversations with school district staff. I'm not aware of any. We did go through the series of study sessions at the city council that Christina discussed earlier in the presentation. So there were quite a few public meetings and hearings leading up to tonight's discussion. However, I'm
looks like Mr. Burris wishes to speak. Don, go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. Don Burris here, Director of Economic Development Services. I am part of the team of the cannabis team, and no, we did not talk with the school district in regards to the 600 feet. We didn't talk with the school district, not because we didn't think it was a worthwhile conversation. We were using the state's default as 600 feet, knowing that we have the ability to either make that 600 feet shorter or actually longer. So to answer your question directly, no, we did not directly speak with the school district.
Thank you, Don. Alicia, you only used about 30 seconds of your comments. Do you have others you wish to make? And if not, go ahead and lower your hand on the Zoom screen. I don't hear Alicia speaking any further, and she just muted herself. Are there any other members of the public who wish to address the commission on this issue? Madam Secretary, is there anybody on the phone or that's not on the screen that shows that they wish to address the commission?
No, there is not.
Well, then I will go ahead. I'm gonna wait a couple more seconds just to make sure I didn't miss something on this. And seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. And we now move from kind of the gathering the information to stating what direction we think we should go. And again, it is open to members of the commission to make those comments. I know I have some thoughts, but I want to hear what everybody else has to say. Commissioner Brecken, your hand's up. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. And I would also like to thank staff for doing a great job on the presentation. So my concern when I looked at this was that we were putting marijuana dispensary retail in commercial retail areas so that somebody can go to Safeway or what have you, and it'd be in the same parking lot and go right next door to buy marijuana. And that just kind of was concerning because, I've talked to a lot of people, and while there are some people who would think that'd be great, I think people in Vacaville tend to be very concerned with safety and crime. And staff states in its presentation that these dispensaries attract or create maybe attract crime. They're a cash-only business. So that is one concern. So what are we bringing to the parking lots of these what I'm calling Safeways, to these commercial centers? Even if you don't go into the store itself, you're creating crime in the parking lot, perhaps. I don't know if staff has done extensive research on crime. The other that is caused by the dispensaries, and the other concern. I also am concerned with the schools, and my thinking is if 600 feet is not very long. It's a couple blocks. It's you can walk it real quick, and if you're in a high school and 18 years old, you can on a break, lunch, or what have you, go walking over to the dispensary, get your medical marijuana, walk back to school, and give it away or sell it. And it'd be completely legal to buy it, maybe not so legal to sell it, but I could see that happening. So 600 feet seems really way too close for at least the high schools. I think that, I'd be more comfortable with a mile, but I would be I guess, even more comfortable with not having it in commercial areas, having the dispensaries be in, a business park area or industrial area. And I know Dixon and Davis, I don't know their zoning, but I think it's not in a retail commercial area. And maybe if maybe the rest of the commission might agree with postponing it for a week till we can find out more information on crime and what the school districts think about this. There was a Martinez Unified School District article where there was a high school and an adult school that were 1,200 feet away from a marijuana dispensary, and this school protested a dispensary being put there. I mean, it was a proposed dispensary, so the school was protesting in the newspaper and what have you about the proposed dispensary being put 1,200 feet away, and they had some of these concerns. I think the default of 600 feet might just be not thinking things through, perhaps with as far as safety and crime. And certainly in Vacaville, we have our own culture and we try to keep a safe town. I think that's it. I might have other things to say. That's it.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. I see that Mr. Burris has his hand up, and then Commissioners Beaumont and Klein. But Don, did you want, and then Commissioner Lightfoot? Hold on, I was muted. I'm sorry. Don?
Yes.
Go ahead. And then after that, several commissioners, but go ahead, Don.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to address some of Commissioner Brecken's concerns. If you'd like, I'm happy just to take notes and address all of the commissioners' concerns at the end, or would you like for me to address as we go along?
If you have specific responses to comments or questions brought up by the commissioners, let's go ahead and deal with those directly. So go ahead, Don.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Brecken, thank you for the comments and the concern. So first, when it comes to crime, so as it stands today, there's been only one criminal case in the state of California and Southern California around cannabis retail. And that case actually isn't with a resident, it's with that retail location actually being robbed. So there's no documented cases that we've been able to uncover. We've talked with our other agencies and other agencies around the entire Bay Area. So that crime element, it isn't actually an element that's happening with the retail outlets. Moreover, if the retail outlets are in more traditional retail locations, that also helps to kind of diminish the criminal activity, because who wants to try to rob someone or something in the middle of the day next to a Safeway or any of the other major retail outlets? As I mentioned earlier today, if we do push all of the cannabis into the industrial parks, then what we're actually going to see is less revenue being generated by those businesses, which means they may not succeed, as well as the city coffers will not benefit from that sales tax revenue, because many residents around the entire Bay Area have spoken and said, why do we have to go to the dark industrial park to buy cannabis when, if the cannabis is a retail business, why can't it be in a retail location? So I'm not sure where the logic behind not having it in a retail location. It would not be any different than if we had went to a liquor store that is in the retail center, or even going into the Safeway with your children, where Safeway actually does sell beer and alcohol.
Thank you, Mr. Burris. I have, after that, Commissioner Beaumont, and then Commissioner Klein, and then Commissioner Lightfoot. Commissioner Beaumont, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just have about 4 or 5 comments, and then you can get back to me if you want to. First off, in attachment 1 under purpose, it says that the cannabis business is recognized as being economically and socially beneficial to residents of Vacaville. I can see the economic side where the tax revenue stream is what the city wants. No one in my social circle benefits from this at all socially. So I would say some residents might benefit, but certainly not all residents benefit from this at all. Another comment under community benefits on page 39, where the money from the cannabis industry can be used to fund youth centers, boys and girls clubs, school athletic programs, school clubs. Here we're talking about 600 feet buffer plus longer, wider buffers. And yet we're going to have Joe's Pot Shop sponsor Little League teams. I'm having a hard time with that, seeing that that's a community benefit. Another comment on page 49 at the top, it says substantial change of ownership, changes that result in a change of more than 51%. I think you want that to read 51% or more, because then you've ruled out 51% the way it's written right here on page 49. And finally, on page 55, you're talking about storing currency. It's an all cash business. And I'm on the Travis Credit Union Board of Directors. And since it's a Schedule I controlled substance by the feds, most banks and credit unions won't take the money because you can't follow the trail very well. Well, I would sit there and say that if anybody wants a permit in Vacaville, that they have to have some banking connection where to store their cash in order to not limit the security problems that you have with the businesses that we open in Vacaville. There are some banks out there that take the cash that are very good at following the money, but most banks and credit unions will not do that. But I would suggest we have some banking requirement for the businesses we open in Vacaville. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Beaumont. Next up is Commissioner Klein. Go ahead, Brandon.
Thank you. I just have a couple of observations and maybe a point of clarification. I'll start with the point of clarification as to the social benefits. And I have to agree with Commissioner Beaumont that as written, the social benefits are not clear. I know that there is some, and I've spoken to staff about this already, but just to air my view on the Cannabis Equity Grant Program, I'm a little disappointed to see no reference to the equities here, because it's difficult to discuss legalization without pausing to reflect on the war on drugs and the impacts on justice and the effects on justice impacted people. It's just not clear to me as written how the social benefits as to the equities are going to be addressed. And I fail to see a plan for how Vacaville is going to harmonize the social benefits in light of how Vacaville has really been on both sides of this issue, with the ban, the litigation, and now a full-throated embrace of legalization. As said, the point of clarification with the timeline and the exemption, I guess I'd like to know what happens if we go the traditional route that Sql would require, sans the exemption in Malcursa. Would that just require an EIR, or would there be some? So what's the benefit and the costs with losing that exemption if we were to take more time to have a well-reasoned cannabis policy and a land use element?
Thanks, Brandon. And on that last one, I think I'll ask staff to directly address that if we did not act, but were delayed past that deadline, what would that do as far as our CEQA process is concerned?
This is Fred Buderi. I'll answer that, and certainly correct me, any of the other staff, if I missed something. But missing that deadline would mean that for the purpose of adopting the ordinances that are going to be presented to the City Council, the city staff would be going through the CEQA initial study process. That could result in a variety of different end result documents, that the largest case being it could be an environmental impact report, but it could also result in some lesser level of environmental review. We would not know that until we actually went through the process of going through that CEQA study. So that process really would be something we haven't determined at this point. It normally takes a number of months to go through the initial study process and make that call on the type of document that would be needed, and then that would go through the regular CEQA review process as part of the ordinance adoption. So it would be a time factor of certainly months, and cost, of course, would vary depending on the complexity of the analysis.
Thanks, Fred. Commissioner Klein, your hand is still up. Did you have additional question or comment as follow-up?
I'll just comment that I think that it would probably be worth considering the alternative to rushing to capture this exemption if it means that we have a more well-reasoned and just a well-thought-out approach to commercial cannabis activity in Vacaville. I'm sort of leaning toward maybe trying to postpone this, or in some way study some alternatives to rushing just to capture this exemption, when I think that we might be overlooking how we would do this best for the community of Vacaville.
Well, great. Hold on to that thought. I want to make sure the other commissioners have a chance to also comment. But I see Mr. Nam has his hand up. David, go ahead, and then we'll go to Commissioner Lightfoot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the comment and concerns, Commissioner Klein. Certainly staff appreciates that. The additional information that I'd like to present, and Mr. Vacaville, please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but if we miss this exemption, notwithstanding that council has directed us to meet the exemption, it would put the city in a position where if we were to undertake a CEQA analysis, it would be an additional cost for the city. And as I understand it, CEQA analysis is not a cheap thing to do, which would place the city in a position of deciding whether to expend those funds to undertake the CEQA analysis or forego it and forego having an ordinance altogether.
And this is Fred Buderi. You are correct, David. And so in their action, the council, when they directed us to proceed with preparing an ordinance, did direct us to proceed with the intention of trying to meet the deadline presented by the state law. And Mr. Nam's description of the CEQA process there, yes, it would result in a more costly process for the city, and also that longer time period in order to put an ordinance into effect.
Thanks, Fred. And again, as with Commissioner Klein, hold on to that. When we get to the point where we're actually taking action, we'll have to balance out the council's desires and the commission's desires. But with that, I see Commissioner Lightfoot has his hand up. So Ralph, you've got it. And then after that, Vice Chair Fortney will have the floor. But go ahead, Mr. Lightfoot.
Hi, thank you very much. So I just want to kind of brainstorm where some of the ideas that were thrown out and kind of hear what everybody has to say about just three of them. So first off, I understand the retail locations and the higher visibility as being a good solution. And I like the location in higher visibility areas, and I agree that I think that might actually mitigate some of the crime or issues that we have there. Number two, regarding the distance around schools, I hear what Commissioner Brecken is saying, and I was wondering maybe a trade-off. What she expressed was specifically a reason to extend it around high schools, and I was wondering if we could think about extending the boundary around high schools or making a high school a different designation than other types of schools. So maybe around a high school itself, the area is long. I'd like to hear what everybody thought of that. And then number three, the banking requirement that was brought up by Commissioner Beaumont. I think that's a interesting idea. And I think that that could be beneficial in security, and it seems like most people are concerned about crime. I'd like to hear what maybe what people thought about that might actually inhibit the business altogether, and if that's a possibility of securing banking or not. I don't know who would answer that question, if that's available, or would it effectively just kill the plan altogether?
Is there anyone on staff who wishes to address that banking issue that Commissioner Beaumont brought up, and then Commissioner Lightfoot has a question on? Anybody on staff want to bring that one up? I see again, Mr. Nam and then Mr. Burrs both have hands up. David, why don't you go ahead and start?
Sure, thank you again. And I'll make a brief comment and then defer to Mr. Burrs as well. Just kind of putting it in context, of course, here tonight, we're here about the land use aspect of it. But in terms of banking, there has been banking regulations around cannabis for a long time. Certainly other jurisdictions that are doing this have had the ability to work with the cannabis businesses around the all cash business aspect of it. And so we wouldn't be unique in trying to grapple with those concerns as well. But in order to make a requirement of something that's not related to the land use and development code today, I feel is not within the scope of tonight's discussion.
So I'm actually going to ask Andrea to address this, since you're advising us as the commission. Is the question of requiring banking access within the subject matter purview of the Planning Commission?
Thank you, Chair McCauley. The item before the commission tonight has to do with the Land Use and Development Code. Regulations pertaining to the business permitting would fall under the regulatory scheme. And so I think while that is an important comment, I think for the commission to bring forward for consideration by the council, it does not appear to be something that has to be determined tonight as you consider this Land Use and Development Code ordinance.
Thank you, Andrea. I see both Don Burris and Christina Love have their hands up, but I'd like to go on to Vice Chair Fortney. So I'm going to do that, and then just hold your thoughts. We'll come back to you. But Mr. Fortney, you have the floor.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I think it's important to look at that. This ordinance is coming to us it's coming out of a study session that was done for the City Council back in April 27th. So I think the intent was to have this done in front of us this evening so that we can make a decision and move forward and not postpone this. So I would not be supportive in postponing this. I think it needs to be allowed in the general commercial entities. Hiding and putting it in the industrial, isolating it to the industrial area isn't fair or safe for the residents of Vacaville that will be shopping. So they shouldn't suffer and be put at risk to be isolated in the industrial park. The thing that is up for discussion, I like and I agree with the 600 feet at the state's default. That is open for discussion. So either way, I'm good there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Again, I see David and Christina have their hands up. I'll go to you, and then I've got some thoughts unless Jan Aldrich raises her hands first. Christina, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to address kind of a general comment or a common comment that's been made in regard to the distance. So I'll remind commissioners that we are proposing a conditional use permit. So the 600 foot buffer can be extended for uses where commission feels that the use needs to be farther. So it's basically, it can be a minimum buffer difference or minimum buffer setback. So for a school, if a school is closer, or if we're isolating, one of the comments was isolating just high schools through the conditional use permit, and that review, which does go to Planning Commission, there is the ability to increase that buffer if it is felt necessary at the time.
Thanks, Christina. Jan, you're unmuted, but your hand isn't up. Did you want to address the commission at this point?
Yes, I would, please.
Go ahead.
I agree with Commissioner or Vice Chair Fortney and Mr. Don Burris as far as the retail goes. I'm thinking about of high school, and high schoolers drive. So I don't care how many feet you put it away from high schools, they can get there. I'm thinking of the vape shops and the tobacco shops that are in the Vacaville area, in our commercial area, in fact, in the downtown area and in the Nut Tree. And they seem to be doing fine. So I don't want to postpone this either. This has been in the works. I've been on the commission for eons, it seems, and this has been up forever. And I think it's time to move on. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Aldrich. I know I certainly have some thoughts on this, and I think I'm somewhat more orienting myself towards this as an issue of whoever just muted me, please don't do that. This is really a question of liberty, and really the people in the state and the city have said, we're comfortable with marijuana sales and opportunities. I think that part of what we have right now is it's kind of based on people being more concerned about marijuana sales than the statistics actually support. And I think our approach should be much more, we have the sort of separations for sales as we have with alcohol, just as we have the sort of limits on the use of smoking of it as we do with tobacco. I would say the only justification for the 600-foot separation is because it's right now required to be a cash business from what I think are some fairly stupid federal regulations, that because of that, there's a security question. And if those federal regulations go away and people are able to use regular banking than cash only, then that 600-foot separation really becomes excessive, and we should have the same sort of separations between cannabis businesses and sensitive users as we have for alcohol businesses. I don't really see the business as substantially different. I know the council was not comfortable with cultivation. I actually would not mind at all if we, in our policy plans, allowed for indoor cultivation, as long as they have adequate security, because I think indoor cultivation really is just another indoor use, and we just need to make sure there is adequate security on that. So I think I'm taking a little more open and liberal sort of view on what should be allowed than the other members of the commission. I see Commissioner Klein's hand is up, but I just want to now step from my opinion back to my chair role and say right now what we see is several commissioners weren't comfortable with the general commercial and others were. So we'll need to decide if we're comfortable with general commercial as a use. There's some discussion about what the separation should be and whether we should call high schools out as a separate use and therefore creating a larger distance. And I think those are the two substantial things. And it looks like the question of banking, our legal advice is that while that's something important to the city, it's not necessarily within the Planning Commission purview. And with that, I see Commissioner Klein's hand is back up, so I'm going to turn the floor back over to Brandon. Go ahead, sir.
I just want to not let the equity question slip by. I guess I'm the only one that thinks that that's an issue of concern. So I'm just asking staff, is there any plan to make Vacaville an equity jurisdiction under the California Equity Grant Program?
And Commissioner, before we go to staff on that, I appreciate you're not letting that item drop. And what is the equity issue in that program you're talking about? Sounds like you're familiar with it, and I'd like you to share your insights with us.
Well, I'm familiar with the legislature's efforts to reverse the war on drugs through this program. They passed the California Cannabis Equity Act along with Malcursa. And it provides jurisdictions that are trying to deal with the issue within their jurisdiction, additional funds and programmatic support. There's some of it ties into census tract data schools, areas where areas that have been exceptionally impacted by the war on drugs, additional arrests, or people who have been locked up, and families have been impacted by it. And so that ties into census tract data, and it provides a equity path for people that have been affected to become licensees. And this is not squarely, I will acknowledge, a land use issue, but this is still something that is dear to me, and I'd like to see whether or not there would be a plan down the line to programmatically tie that into the decision we're going to make on cannabis.
And Brandon, a further question, if I can, for you. Is this more of a question of making sure that certain neighborhoods don't have an over-concentration of licenses for sale as we have with alcohol? Or is it trying to make sure that there's an adequate distribution of licenses across the ethnic spectrum so that certain groups aren't cut out from the opportunity to participate? And I see David and Andrea both have their hands up. So Brandon, if you will hold on that, I think I can go to my legal counsel and let them speak first. So David and then Andrea. Go ahead, David.
Thank you. I'm just going to thank Commissioner Klein for the comments and note that we will forward that comment over. And I'm sure Mr. Burris is taking good notes on that. Thank you.
Andrea, go ahead.
I just wanted to let the commission know that while it's okay to discuss areas of collateral interest for the purpose of providing feedback to the city council, as David has indicated, we will. I wanted to make sure that the commission was aware that those specific issues related to equity are not connected to the land use decision that's before the commission this evening.
So the only thing that might be a question of land use would be if we wish to put in some sort of regulatory language regarding over-concentration, but the other things are the business side, but not necessarily the land use side. So appreciate the reminder on that. I'm going to go back to Commissioner Klein to see if you have any wrap up on this. But Andrea, your hand is still up. Go ahead, you get it first.
I just wanted to also ensure that the commission is focused in on what you're considering this evening, and wanted to make it clear that if this ordinance is approved by the city council, that the conditional use permit decisions are discretionary. The individual use permits would still come before the planning commission in the future. And at that time, issues that are more policy related, such as proximity to school locations, neighborhood concentration, all of those sorts of things are going to be items that the commission can consider when making findings related to the grant of a conditional use permit. So I want the commission to have an understanding that the issues raised this evening still have opportunity to be addressed when the commission is considering individual use permits.
Thanks, Andrea. Commissioner Klein, you're unmuted. Did you have anything else you wanted to add at this point?
I'm definitely focused on the scope of our decision making. The policy references social programming, right? And so what did we mean by social? If we're not going to be dealing with and this is a very specific, this is why people legalize.
And let's look that up. Is that within, because I'm not looking at my staff packer right now, is that within the Land Use and Development Code amendment, or is that within the other section that the council is looking at, but that's not in front of us? If somebody could look that specifically up, we'll make sure we're dealing with it properly.
Right. That's a great question, Chair. And I'm just curious, what do we mean by what would be the social impacts that are going to be advanced by this land use policy, and if they can be focused on working with the governor's office on equity programs, that would be terrific. And that's just really, that's the I don't know if that's a comment that we can provide when we make the recommendation to council, that we clarify what is intended for the programmatic and social aspects of this, and explore trying to get funds to implement an equity jurisdiction here. That's all.
So I'm first going to turn to staff and ask them to help us find within the action we're taking tonight, whether it is within the wording in the ordinance or any of the findings, is there a specific reference to social equity within what we're taking action on tonight that we should then tie any comments to?
Okay, we're scanning through the ordinance.
Okay. And for everyone else, pardon while we have dead air, but staff is looking quickly for something, and we're going to wait for him.
Chair, this is Commissioner Beaumont.
Commissioner Beaumont, go ahead.
Yeah, just a question. I'm assuming one of our options tonight is to say no to this and just keep 913 the way it is.
Well, I will look to council. I would expect the answer is yes, that we always have the option to recommend that the city council not adopt the changes that are proposed. Andrea, did I get that right?
Yes, Chair, that's correct.
Okay, so that is one of our options, Commissioner Beaumont. Christina, you unmuted. Did you find what we're looking for?
Well, so I guess I'm not entirely sure. Okay, never mind. I just had my question asked. So in writing the purpose as far as the social benefits, what I was referring to are based on the multiple comments that we received through the course of the years from the general public, as well as the rather lengthy public meeting that we held a couple years ago when we first considered potential for regulations within the city of Vacaville. And that was that the social benefit of allowing our residents direct access within their city to what they felt was what they felt is their necessary medicine, and as opposed to forcing them to drive out of town or to force them to order from out of town and deliver directly to their house rather. So that the social benefit being we're responding to the residents in providing them the direct access and direct ability to what they voted for.
Thank you. David Nam, your hand is up. Go ahead, David.
Thank you. And I think Christina actually covered it. I wasn't sure if we were referring to community benefits as it was related to section 9.13.110, which clearly is not before the Planning Commission tonight, or we were talking about the general purpose and social benefits that Christina covered so aptly. Thank you.
But I'm going to see if then I can craft together some actions for us to take. Clearly, there are commission comments related to issues such as banking and seeking out social equity and grants we want to make sure are handled in this. Before I try and craft that, I see Commissioner Brecken has her hand up. Wendy, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Before you craft, I was thinking, since there seems to be a majority that wants commercial retail, if that is the case, I'm not sure. May I suggest maybe 2,500 feet away from high schools and creating a separate category for high schools, just so that young adults don't have immediate access next to the school.
Let me see what I can pull together by going through point by point. I think the first thing Commissioner Beaumont seemed to indicate he might be interested in are simply recommending that the council not adopt this, and we take a no vote this evening. Doug, did I properly restate what is your interest?
Well, I was just wondering if that was an option. It seems to be that this has not been I didn't look in the paperwork and find anything that said that was an option. So that's my question.
Okay, since legal counsel has said it is an option, I'm going to ask if any of the commissioners wish to follow that option, that we recommend that the council simply not adopt this ordinance. Wendy, I see your hands up. I'm not sure if you want to recommend that or if your hand is just still up. So any commissioners that want to follow that, and Wendy, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know how to lower your hand. Okay, sorry. No, I didn't want to say no to the entire ordinance. No.
Okay, so it doesn't look like there's a commission momentum on that one. So next I'm going to go to the question of whether the use should be allowed in the general commercial district. There were some commissioners that seemed to think yes, and some commissioners no. And again, what I want to do is a little informal, but I just want to take an informal poll of the commission before we try and put together final wording on the motion. So I'd like to see those commissioners that think we should not allow this use within the general commercial district. Raise your hand and then I'll give you a chance to speak if you want to. I see Wendy's hand is up, but no other hands. Again, Commissioner Brecken, if you want to talk about whether it should be in the general commercial, and then we'll move on to the next item. But Wendy, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to my previous comments that it doesn't have to be, a business park area doesn't have to be an isolated area. So I don't think we've really explored what are the alternatives to a commercial area. Yeah, that's it.
Got it. At this point right now, Commissioner Brecken seems to be the only one who would wish to not allow it in the general commercial. Again, I'll ask, does anybody else want to indicate that they agree with that? And see no other hands. Again, we'll come back to a final action trying to pull all this together. The next question is one regarding the separations that we've heard. Several commissioners think that it should be longer, and one of those that thinks that it should be that or even shorter. And then the idea that we should allow or require a broader separation around high schools. So first I'll ask, again, polling, are there commissioners that think we should create a greater buffer around high schools than any other sensitive land uses? If so, raise your hand and I'll give you the chance to speak if you'd like. So Commissioners Brecken and Klein and Beaumont have their hands up, and I'll go in that order. Wendy, any comments you want to make?
Not any more than I've said before.
Okay, Commissioner Klein, anything you want to add, Brandon?
I mean, I think this might speak to, I know that people have said that this has been coming a long time. This is, to my knowledge, this is the first time I've seen it as a commissioner. And I'm not even familiar with this issue enough to speak to the social and some of the issues that it might have on the high schools and the like. But I do see the high school as a particularly sensitive area. That even though, yeah, you can drive, but I mean, the opportunity really should be limited near high schools, if anywhere else in the city, I would say. So I would be open to talking more about exploring how to limit access to high school students.
Thanks, Brandon. Commissioner Beaumont, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Well, I'd just say there's only 2 high schools in Vacaville that are affected. So I agree that it should be more than 600 feet. Half a mile is fine with me, 2,500 feet. You're not going to keep them from going there if they want to and drive, but at least it's you can't walk there and get back in time if there's a recess or lunch break or whatever. So they're the vulnerable ones as far as I'm concerned. The rest of the schools are not vulnerable.
Okay, thanks. And while I see Mr. Burris has his hand up right now, I'm just going to stay with the commissioners. So we have 3 that would support a greater distance separation for high schools. So I'm going to ask you to put your hands down now if you're not a commissioner, and ask which commissioners would not support a larger distance for high schools. Please go ahead and raise your hand. Right now, Wendy, your hand is still up, so you're on both sides. So Commissioner Fortney, Commissioner Lightfoot's hands are up. Jan, I haven't seen you on either side on this.
I don't know the difference between unmuting and putting your hand up.
Okay. On Zoom, on the lower right corner, there's a little yellow box that says raise your hand. So I'm going to interpret. Okay, so I'm going to interpret that Commissioner Aldrich does not support a larger distance. And I'm going to give then Commissioner Fortney and then Commissioner Lightfoot a chance to speak. So Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to go back to that. I think the 600 feet default by the state is sufficient. And if I'm correct in hearing, every conditional use permit that's being applied for is going to come before us. And if you, at that point, you feel that it's too close to a high school for that location, you as a planning commissioner have the opportunity to say no to it at that time, if I'm correct. That's all my 2 cents.
Thanks, Commissioner Lightfoot. Go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah, on the back of that, I think that satisfied it for me. I mean, I think that if we have this as a conditional use permit where every commission will see the actual location, I think that I'm okay with the 600 feet.
Thanks. I will find myself falling in with the latter three, that I don't support a broader separation for high schools. I think the sale of the marijuana is as likely to be in the parking lot as it is in a legal spot that's a couple of 100 feet down the road. I think the ability of things coming before the Planning Commission, and if something is close to one of our high schools, whether that's Buckingham Charter or one of the 2 regular high schools or even Vacaville Christian, we'd have a chance to look at those specifics and say, because you're close to a high school, are there additional security or ways to monitor and make sure students aren't coming in to buy when they're underage? I think we can look at it at that point. So we've got the question of the general commercial use. We've got the question of the separation. We seem to have a broad consensus and that we should go forward. So right now we have a recommendation from staff that is shown in the staff report and then up on our screen. And when I polled the commission, I did not see what appeared to be a consensus towards amending anything that was in the presentation for this evening. So I'm going to ask if one of the commissioners that seems to have been in favor of this wants to go ahead and make a motion and then a second, and then we'll go from the straw polls we've been taking to a formal vote. So do I have a motion? Commissioner Aldrich, go ahead with your motion.
I recommend that the Planning Commission, that the City Council of the City of Vacaville approve the proposed draft ordinance to amend Chapter 14.02.016 definitions, uses, adopt Chapter 14.09.140 supplemental standards, cannabis businesses, and amend policy plans.
Commissioner Fortney, your hand is up. Are you seconding that motion?
I am, Chair.
Okay. I will now ask for any formal amendments that are proposed to the motion. I see no hands up for a formal amendment, so I'll ask the secretary to call the roll based on the motion that's been made.
Commissioner Aldrich.
Yes.
Beaumont.
No.
Brecken.
No.
Klein.
Nope.
Lightfoot.
Yes.
Vice Chair Fortney.
Yes.
Chair McCauley.
Yes. Looks like we have a 4-3 vote. Mr. Baderi, what is the disposition of this item?
All right, so the Planning Commission's recommendation is for approval of the proposal. The recommendation will be forwarded on to the City Council, and staff help me out here. I believe we have a council meeting selected as the likely hearing date for the item.
Yes, sir. We're first reading is scheduled for June 8th.
Thank you.
And Fred, I will ask you to very carefully note the number of Planning Commission comments and the closely split vote, and make sure the council very clearly gets a feel for what the discussion was back and forth on the numerous issues. that came up in front of the commission. Before
Yes.
we go on, I see Don Burris has his hand up. So Don, I'll ask you to make a comment that's related to our action tonight before we go on to the next item. Go ahead, Don.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to hopefully provide some comfort for Commissioners Beaumont and Brecken regarding schools and security. One of the things that we did not have a conversation about, which really kind of falls into the regulatory part of this process, is that the security that's required, not only by the state, but what most cities also impose on the retail cannabis businesses, you're not even allowed inside the building unless you have a valid identification to actually come inside. Unless our high school students have the best, fake identification, they would not even be allowed inside the building, let alone be able to get in and purchase product. So the security measures are very, very strict. Most of those security measures throughout California are being written with the businesses by law enforcement officers. There actually are several retired law enforcement officers who are very specifically crafting the security regulations and security programs that the cannabis businesses have to adhere to.
And Don, I think since we've already taken our action, I'm going to ask you to wrap up real quick because we do need to move on to other things. Now that might be good for discussion in front of the council, but since you brought something up, I got to make sure that Commissioners Brecken and Klein have a chance to do hopefully a fairly quick response before we move in. But I'm going to turn things over to Wendy and then Brandon.
Perfect.
So, Wendy Brecken, go ahead.
Thanks for that, Don. My question to you is, isn't it legal for 18-year-olds to purchase medicinal marijuana in dispensaries? And if so, couldn't they just go back to school after purchasing it and et cetera?
It is legal as long as they do have the proper identification. It is legal. Well, I guess whether or not you go out and sell it, that's a different story. I don't know if I can actually address that. If we want to talk about the illicit market, I'm happy to share more information with any of the commissioners offline.
Good news, because the illicit market's not under our purview on that. But I'm going to go ahead and, because I want us to move forward, turn things over to Commissioner Klein, and then we'll move on to our next item. So Commissioner Klein, did you have a comment to make?
Yes, Don, can you clarify, are you saying that ex-law enforcement are writing regulations for the Bureau, for the state, or who are they writing the regulations for?
There are several ex-law enforcement officers that are assisting cities with the creation of their security plans. So most cities, literally almost every city, has a very stringent security plan requirement for any cannabis business to open in their city. From things like making sure that cages are literally bolted to the ground and cameras inside and outside of the building at the door. So there are extensive security measures to protect from crime, but also to protect those that are not allowed to be inside the retail locations as well.
And I would expect that if we have a business come before us for a conditional use permit, those are exact sort of things that will be on the permit application. So exactly. we may have multiple opportunities to then deal with the real world results of that. Thank you all for your participation in this item. We are now going to go on to item 7B, which is the transportation involvement in the ECAS. The recommendation is that we continue this to a date certain, which is the June 15th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. Staff, do you have a presentation to make on this?
We do not have a presentation on this one this evening. We are still working on responding to comments received on the draft EIR with the intent of bringing the final EIR responses to comments to the Planning Commission at your June meeting.
Because this is a public hearing, I need to open this for the public, but before I do that, I want to ask if any commissioners have questions for staff at this point. Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and go to the public. So I'm opening the public hearing and asking if any members of the public wish to address the commission on this issue. I see no hands up, so I'm going to close the public hearing, and I'm going to ask for a motion on the recommended action. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion from Commissioner Klein. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Aldridge is the second. Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Aldridge.
Yes.
Beaumont.
Yes.
Brecken.
Yes.
Lightfoot.
Yes.
Vice Chair Fortney.
Yeah.
Chair McCauley.
Yes. Mr. Badera, I believe the disposition of this is it simply moves off to the specified date.
Thank you very much.
Okay, then we will move now from public hearings to business from the floor. This is conducted in a manner similar to the public hearings, but some different state requirements for the outreach on it. Item 8A is the capital improvement plan, general plan consistency review. Again, for members of the public who are watching, this is not whether the Planning Commission approves of the capital improvement project, simply our conclusions on whether or not the proposed CIP is consistent with the general plan or not. So when you see the presentation, that's what it is a consistency review. With that, I will turn things over to city staff to make their presentation.
Good evening, this is Maya Amichai, planning technician. So I will be kind of providing an overview of the 2021-2022 capital improvement program, in particular, as mentioned, regarding general plan consistency. Next slide, please. The projects on the list for this round are throughout the city, as you can see on this map. And we recommend that City Council find that they are all, and that the list in entirety is consistent with the general plan. Next slide, please. California law requires that every capital improvement program project be consistent with the general plan. I won't go through each one individually, but we'll provide an overview of all of them. The projects on the list include well projects, sewer projects, water lines, fire, safety, and technology improvements. And 15 out of the 26 projects are for park and recreation improvements. These include trails, pools, buildings, and parks. The parks and recreation projects are consistent with goal PR1 of the general plan, and they also implement the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Next slide, please. So 2 of the park and recreation projects are a recreation facility at a park that currently does not have a building, and replacing the pool heater at Three Oaks Aquatic Complex. Next slide, please. Projects also include trail improvements to the Ulatis Creek bike path, as well as to the Rocky Hill Trail. For the Ulatis Creek, it's an extension, and for Rocky Hill Trail, it's to add amenities such as lighting and landscaping. These projects are consistent with PR1, as well as the transportation element, goal TR8, which calls to improve the network of bikeways. Next slide, please. And here we show 2 projects on the list, the replacement of wooden bridges in Lagoon Valley and adding lighting to 2 ball fields that currently cannot be used in the evening. Next slide, please. Projects also include updating the park structures at these 2 parks, as well as several other neighborhood parks throughout the city. Another item on the list is to add sensory equipment that will make the parks more accessible to people with varying abilities. Next slide, please. And these 2 projects on the list for the new, it's specifically a wildland fire truck for fighting wildfires, and generators for the evacuation centers, which are community facilities. These are both consistent with the general plan safety element, as well as the public services and facilities element. Next slide, please. In conclusion, planning staff did review every project on the list, and each one is consistent with the general plan, and details are outlined in your packets. And that's it. Any questions?
Commissioner Beaumont has his hand up. I'm going to go to him in a second, but I do have one question. As I look through all these lists, and I see some of the things that I'm delighted to see, such as the Rocky Hills Trail, some of the work on the adaptive sensory, and the number of parks. I don't see in the general plan findings any sort of language of making sure that the city's investments in CIP benefit all aspects or all neighborhoods or all portions of the city. Do we have any general plan policies so that we make sure that, for example, in one year we don't put all of our improvements in just one portion of the city, but really the entire city is benefiting on a regular basis from our investments? Do we have any policies like that?
This is Fred Buderi speaking. We do not have a policy specifically stating the point you made, Chair McCauley. The general plan, however, does call for the provision of features in these various elements that Maya has mentioned throughout the city. And so I think the best way to look at that is that when the park master plan is developed or the public safety facilities master plans are developed, they are done with the intention of providing services equally throughout the city. And so the general plan's policies will speak mostly about the physical location of community facilities or improvements to the community in the sense of spreading those improvements throughout the community. The CIP then will just be adjusted each year to try and pick up those projects that the city's obtained funding for. So I hope that answers your question. The general plan does look at providing services and access to facilities throughout the city, and then we implement that through the capital improvement program.
Okay, thanks, Fred. I do see a number of the other commissioners have hands up, so I'm going to go to them. Straight will be Commissioner Beaumont, then Klein, then Brecken, then Lightfoot. Commissioner Beaumont, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Maya, for the report. My question is just general. Are these projects to-do lists for this next year, or is this just to set up in a queue that they will be done in an order that happens either this year or next year's?
Yes, the latter. They're in a queue that will be done over the next 5 years. I would have to defer to Fred on whether all of them will get done in 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
And this is Fred. Yes, so these will create the projects that to which funds are allotted. In some cases, they may be constructed sooner than 5 years. It's possible others beyond for some of the larger projects. We do have staff from the Public Works Department, Assistant Public Works Director Tim Burke, as well as Acting Parks and Recreation Director Reggie Hubbard with us this evening if you have more detailed questions about any of those projects.
Doug, do you have follow-up on that, or does that answer your question?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Great, then I will turn things over to Commissioner Klein for his questions or comments. Go ahead, Brandon.
Thank you, Maya, for that terrific presentation. I just have, I'm not trying to be funny, but it looked like in that picture of the baseball fields that there actually were lights at night. So I'm just, is that to replace the existing lights, or what's that about?
The picture is a stock image. It's not of the actual parks. I believe those ball fields do not have lighting. But if I'm wrong, please correct me.
I thought that there were lights at Centennial and Arlington Parks, but maybe there aren't. but it was it's really not material to my question. I was just curious if there were lights. I'm not going to vote against it on that basis. I just would like to point out inconsistencies. But I think in the future, it would be nice to see like the 5-year capital improvement plan so that we get context of what has already come and then how this, how the queue is set up to get an idea of rather than just seeing the new projects, we can see, you know, in the context of capital planning, you can generally count on a 5-year horizon for improvement projects of this scale. So I know I'm new to this, but I would love to see what's already happened. This is kind of to the question before mine, but it would be nice to know what we've already done in the past and what the queue looks like. So that's just more of a comment. Thank you.
I see the next person with a question or comment is Commissioner Brecken. Go ahead, Wendy.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, just to piggyback off of what Commissioner Klein was saying, it would be great to see the big picture, and maybe that's something we can do in the future. I know the City Council held a Measure M special meeting, and I think the CIP projects, some of them or all of them were included in that. And it's, you know, my confusion as a new commissioner is how these projects get prioritized, and does the Planning Commission have a say in the priority of projects, things like that. Also, specifically, I did talk with Mr. Paxton about the sewer and water line issues, and that was interesting, and I want to thank him very much for that. And I spoke with the fire chief about the new fire engine. But I didn't get a chance to speak with Mr. McLean, the Deputy Director of Public Works, about the garage doors at Fire Station 72 and the new security, and I guess in all the fire stations. And I just maybe was hoping he or somebody else at Public Works could say why those things are needed.
And Commissioner Lightfoot, we'll get to you in a second. I do want to give, whether it's Fred or Tim Burke, a chance to talk a little bit about the CIP and how the Planning Commission's role of general plan consistency fits into the overall process of the CIP being prepared and then presented to council. Fred, do you want to handle that, or should Tim deal with it?
You know, actually, I'd like to Tim, if he could say a few comments about how the CIP list prepared and how that's implemented. Would that be okay?
Mr. Burke, you have the floor.
All right, thank you, Chair and Fred. Appreciate it. So we get capital improvement projects from all the departments at the city that, and what they do is they make up their list of items that they believe that they need or have been prioritized over the years from their, whether it's a parks master plan or a sewer and water, wastewater master plan. And depending on where projects are needed most, because of, could be from development, increased traffic, various departments will put together their capital improvement project list. And then they will go ahead and prioritize based on funding, based on overall need, and they'll put that list together. We take that list, the Public Works Engineering Services Department, or excuse me, division, and bring that to Planning Commission for general plan consistency. As Fred and Maya have said, is that the city municipal code requires that capital improvement projects be consistent with the general plan. And so we bring that to the Planning Commission for that finding. Once we get that finding, we will present all the projects to for funding to the city council at a study session and the first meeting in June. And if any adjustments need to be made based on council's direction, we will make those adjustments, and then it is brought back to city council at the second meeting in June for final capital improvement project budget adoption. Did that answer your question?
I'll give the commissioners a chance to come back for a second bite at the apple, but really it sounds like we have a fairly limited role in looking at general plan consistency, and the rest of the CIP is really dealt with on the council and their prioritization of their budget overall. Is that a fair summary?
That is a fair summary. What we could do if it's more just you'd like to know more about these projects and more about what projects have been done in the past, we could bring back some informational items and go over those items, or we certainly can provide what is called our quarterly report, which provides a list of all capital improvement projects, what their various stages are at, what the timelines are that have been adopted for that particular project, whether it's fully funded or whether it's only partially funded. So our quarterly report, we produce it 4 times a year.
Hey, Tim, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. Since that's not one of the advertised actions for us to take tonight under Brown Act, I'm not going to deal with that right now, but under commissioner comments at the end, we'll find out if that's something that the rest of the commission might be interested in. So thanks for the offer, but we'll stay within our Brown Act jurisdiction and not deal with that right now. I do see that Commissioner Lightfoot wished to ask a question or make a comment. So Ralph, you have the floor. And Tim, don't forget to go ahead and mute yourself.
Thank you very much. I just have one quick question regarding project number 9, the rec pool heater. I don't think that I know that the public has asked for a competition-sized pool, and that the Three Oaks Community Center possibly be a location for the competition-sized pool. I'm just curious, and I don't think that that's made into a general plan item yet, but curious if updating or upgrading the recreational pool heater might inhibit the construction of a competition-sized pool because we've spent money renovating the rec pool heater at Three Oaks.
So I guess then I will ask staff the first question. Is that something that comes up under a general plan consistency issue, or we can talk a little bit further under commission comments of whether working on the heater limits our ability to implement general plan policies there? And I'm not sure if that's Fred or Reggie that wants to address this one.
Yeah, this is Fred. I will try to address it. From that general plan perspective, I think the question could have relevancy if we undertook a project that would prevent something from occurring that is consistent with the general plan. And I don't know the specific impact of that project on any other future plans that might be prepared for such a pool. I don't know, Reggie, if you can answer that question at this point.
Yes, thank you for that question. And installing the pool heater will not inhibit us from expanding to a competition pool. And just on a side note, expanding to a competition pool is on the Measure M list. So that is something we're in discussion about currently. So thank you for that.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Lightfoot, I hope that answered your questions. Do you have any others?
Yeah, it seems like we're on the same page. I'd hate to see the money expended here to upgrade that pool not be able to be used at a later date if we end up expanding to the competition size pool. That's all. And it seems like we've got that consensus.
Thank you. Any other commissioners with questions before I ask for any public input?
Yes.
See, Commissioner Aldrich, whose hand is not up and who's unmuted. So go ahead, Jen.
I don't have that yellow box you keep telling me. Anyway, I am very much in favor of item number 1, the wildlife type engine for the interface, since I do live on the interface. And a number of people along Leisure Town Road do. I think that would be something that would be very important for those of us who live on the east of Leisure Town side of the city.
So at this point, I don't see any of the commissioners with questions about actual consistency with the general plan, though Commissioner Lightfoot's question was very applicable to that. I'm going to go ahead, since this is a public item, a business item, I'm going to open it up and ask if any members of the public who are on the Zoom or on the phone right now wish to address the commission on this issue. I see no one on Zoom seeking our attention. Madam Secretary, is there anybody on the phone that I'm not aware of that is seeking to address the commission?
I see no one.
Then I'm going to go ahead and close this business item and turn things back to the commission to see, is there any final comments before we seek a motion? And since Commissioner Lightfoot's hand is up, whether intentional or not, I'm going to give you the chance to make comments or make a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, I assume that's to approve the list as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, so I have from Commissioner Lightfoot a motion, Commissioner Aldrich a second, and I'll ask the secretary to call the roll.
Commissioners Aldrich,
Yes.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Brecken,
Yes.
Klein,
Yes.
Lightfoot,
Yes.
Vice Chair Fortney,
Yeah.
Chair McCauley.
Yes. Mr. Baderi, what's the disposition on this?
Okay, so this item is a recommendation to the City Council. Mr. Burke's team will now incorporate your recommendation into their staff report to City Council on the Capital Improvement Program additions, and that will be forwarded to the Council for their budget hearings in June.
Thank you very much. We now go to item number 9, which are the status reports. 9A is the report from the Building Division. Is Mr. Salazar here to make a presentation tonight?
This is Fred Buderi. Mr. Salazar is out of town teaching at a professional conference this week. So we do not have the normal Building Division report that we typically present to you. I do have one item to just mention to the Planning Commission, and that is that this month, May, is recognized as Building Safety Month by the industry. And at next week's City Council meeting, we'll be asking the Council to consider a proclamation designating recognition of that important part of city development related work. So Building Safety Month recognizes the kind of work that goes into building codes, to implementing building codes, along with all of the other kinds of standards, such as environmental protection standards that are incorporated into project designs, and really also in a way pick up on the effect of other departments who participate in the development review process, such as planning for fire protection or other infrastructure type activities. So I just thought I'd mention that to you in the absence of Mr. Salazar's typical report, and recognize that important work by the Building Division.
Thank you for that update, Fred. And why don't I have you roll straight into the Advanced Planning Report, which is item 9B.
Very good. So advanced planning continues to work on a number of large-scale items. Of course, tonight's item with the cannabis staffing has been provided by the Advanced Planning Division. In addition, the one item that we continued, the vehicle miles traveled and energy and conservation action strategy update is being led by Christina Love in the Advanced Planning Division. That project is still in the works. We received a number of comments on the environmental impact report. The project team with their consultants are still working on their responses to those comments to prepare that document for the Commission's consideration. And another very large project still working its way through the process, the Green Tree project. So the consultants on the Green Tree project who are under contract to the city primarily and are preparing technical studies on items such as drainage, water quality, traffic, a number of other topic areas are due to be submitting their technical reports very soon. And what that will enable the developer team and the staff team to do is take a look at the potential environmental effects of the project, start moving forward on that environmental impact report, as well as taking a look at the project plans to see any amendments or suggested alterations that might be good in there. Another item in the advanced planning group is the downtown specific plan. I'll have an additional report on that toward the end of the meeting here. And then the staff from both the current and advanced planning divisions have been working on potential grant opportunities along the Rocky Hill Trail alignment for landscape and other types of improvements that could be installed. And you saw that item on the capital improvement project list. And this group is also working with an outside nonprofit to see if there are some additional funding that could be obtained for additional work on the Rocky Hill Trail. So those are some of the activities going on by that division this month.
Thank you, Mr. Baderi. Any questions for Fred? Seeing none, let's move on to current planning. It looks like Albert will be making that presentation.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. This is Albert Enolt with Current Planning, and I'm here to give you the status update of our activity that we've been processing during April. April was a busy month for Current Planning, and I'll start off with District 1. We received 2 new projects. One is a general plan amendment merit hearing for the Millennium Center over here off of Browns Valley Road. That is 3442 Browns Valley Road. And what the applicant is looking at doing is changing the general plan designation from private recreation to office commercial for just the set of buildings. The rest of the in-shape center is still being proposed to remain private recreation. So that's a merit hearing, and it's going to need to go before City Council to get its blessing before they submit a more detailed application. We also received a smaller custom home development called the Brown House. It's for a new 5,000 square foot single family residence on a vacant parcel of a Gibson Canyon Road. The plan check activity really reflected a lot of the industrial business activity going on, LDK industrial buildings going on, being built off of Midway Road, and some Amazon tenant improvement work going on there. And that we had about 28 plan checks occurring within District 1 during April. In District 2, we had a new project also be submitted, Roberts Ranch, Village C. Taylor Morrison is proposing to construct 5 new house plans in Village C that is comprised of 74 lots. And those architectural designs are going to reflect Craftsman, Cottage, and Tuscan design. So that's a staff level review project. The plan checks within District 2 mainly comprised of new house plans within Roberts Ranch Village A, and then lots of plot plans in Brighton Landing Villages 8, 9, and 11. There were 21 plan checks in District 2. District 3, we have we had a couple of new projects. The Collins Street service building, which is a new 4,800 square foot single-story commercial building that's being proposed. It's a design review request. And then we also reviewed and approved a new temporary use permit for Beer 40 at the southeast corner of Dobbins and East Monte Vista. That's a temporary outdoor beer garden with mobile food trucks, and it will have restrooms and an outdoor seating area. A recap of what occurred last month in April. The Planning Commission voted to approve the Peabody Road Apartments, and that's that 120 unit apartment complex that's at the corner of Cliffside Drive and Peabody Road. There were 6 plan checks in April for that district. The most notable plan check for that one are the Harbison Apartments. That's off of Harbison and Lattice Drive. And you may be driving by there seeing a lot of construction activity occurring out there. District 4, we had a couple of new projects come in. The Creekside Gardens Edition, which is off of 300 Bel Air Drive. What they're looking at doing is demoing a clubhouse and then rebuilding a new clubhouse that would have 2 stories, the first floor being the clubhouse portion, but then they're looking at adding 4 new apartments. And then the Creekside, the Hidden Creek apartment project at 1701 Marshall Road, what they're looking at doing is constructing 2 new 3-story apartment buildings that would have 12 garages. It would be adding a total of 20 units to that existing apartment project. Plan checks were low, mainly residential swimming pools. There were 3 plan checks in District 4. District 5, we received new house plans for the Montesa subdivision off of California Drive. Discovery Builders is looking at building 4 new house plans on 59 lots out there. Architectural themes they're looking at are Bay Area Modern, French Country, and Craftsman Designs. This one is also staff level review. Plan checks in there, again, pretty small in District 5, residential patio covers and swimming pools. There were a total of 6 plan checks for District 5. District 6 was pretty quiet with new projects. We didn't have anything new. We did review 14 new plan checks. We had plot plans for Cerrito and Saratoga development, that's in Vennon Estates and Parkside, and some other residential swimming pools and patio covers. You may see a remodel occurring over at the Taco Bell at 2000 Alamo Drive. Home-based businesses are pretty busy. We still reviewed 24 during April and approved 21 new home-based business permits. And we helped service about 93 development-related inquiries through email and phone. That's it for current planning during April.
Thank you very much, Albert. Item number 10 is the Director's Report, which is City Council actions, tentative schedule, and the status report on the downtown specific plan. Again, Mr. Videri, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So with regard to City Council actions pertaining to Planning Commission items, the City Council actions of late really pertain to items that the Planning Commission had reviewed for comment. So they received a report from the Park and Recreation Department on the Park Master Plan. The Planning Commission reviewed that a couple of months ago with Park and Rec staff. You provided a number of comments that made their way into the Parks and Recreation staff's reports and recommendations to City Council. So their meeting on April 27 was to receive a report and learn about the Park and Rec Master Plan. The City Council will take action on it at a later meeting. The other item, of course, was their session to review proposed cannabis ordinance ideas and provide direction to staff, which of course you dealt with earlier this evening. With regard to tentative schedule of future Planning Commission items. So for your June 15th hearing, we do have a number of items lining up for consideration. There is a hotel project, the Hampton Inn, and this is a proposed hotel located at the Mason Street, where Mason Street crosses under the freeway. So directly next to a service station that's there. So near the corner of Mason and Depot. As we reported earlier, the environmental impact report for the vehicle miles traveled project and ECAS update is scheduled to be before you for a recommendation at next month's hearing. We also expect to have a large presentation for you on the downtown specific plan. The downtown specific plan draft is scheduled to be released on June 7 or 8, and we will have a few weeks of study and review of the downtown specific plan. We would like to conduct a study session with the Planning Commission to go through the contents of the plan with you, to obtain comments, to provide an opportunity for the public to comment on the plan before we then go back and huddle with the consultants and the city staff team to figure out how to prepare the final plan document for you. We may also have consideration of two other items, and that one would be the Land Use and Development Code update. So we can report that at last week's Airport Land Use Commission hearing, Solano County Airport Land Use Commission, they did review the draft Land Use and Development Code update, the entire code. We had an aviation consultant prepare an aviation analysis of the draft code for them, and they did take an action finding that the proposed code is consistent with the airport land use compatibility plans that affect the city of Vacaville, and that's the Nut Tree Airport and Travis Air Force Base. So we're now positioned to bring the final proposed code update to the commission for consideration. It is a large document, and we thought we might start with a review session for you to just kind of go over the contents of the draft code, and we'll try to get that scheduled for the June hearing. And then finally, we do have a request for an extension, time extension on a development agreement in the Southtown area, the Southtown Phase 3 development agreement. That may be ready for a recommendation hearing before the Planning Commission. And so quite a bit of stuff potentially lining up for next month. And with regard to the status report on the downtown specific plan, I did want to just let you know a few more details about it. So again, we plan on releasing it June 7 or 8, and we would like to have a couple of week public review period where we can spend time going to meetings or meeting with folks about the plan, going through some of the comments that we've received over the months that we've worked on the plan. Some of those might include trying to make sure that the images of residential prototypes that we reviewed with the Planning Commission several months ago are accurately reflected in the proposed development standards that we're preparing. So we'd be happy to go through those with the commission. We did get some good comments from you on the residential prototypes for styles of residential development that could occur in the downtown. We have tried to spend some time really going over the design standards for new projects in the downtown area, because that's important in downtown planning. And so we have tried to incorporate some new features into the downtown design standards to help in the implementation of good projects. There may be additional information related to parklets, the small public spaces provided in the public right-of-way. So the City Council has directed us to work on parklet design programs for the downtown, and some of those will be reflected in the downtown specific plan. And finally, we have tried very hard to make the development requirements that are listed in the downtown plan and the development standards look very similar to what you will see in the Land Use and Development Code update, so that persons who use the city documents will not see things in two dramatically different formats. And so we'll go through some of those actions, and we just wanted you to know the types of issues we've been trying to fine tune and be prepared to present to you when that plan comes out.
Thank you, Fred. Any chance that at that June 15th meeting, we'll be seeing you and each other face to face, and with the state seeming to open up, any chance we'll be meeting in person at that time?
At this point, it is very uncertain from everything we understand at the city. There is, of course, uncertainty in exactly what the state will announce in June. We do hope that they'll be loosening up on the restrictions, but at this point, we are not sure if that will carry through to the conduct of public meetings. So at this point, I would expect for the time being, we may be with the remote meetings in June.
We would like to see you and each other, so hopefully that will happen.
And then I guess the final thing that I'd add to the director's report, it's not on the agenda here, but I just wanted to let the Planning Commission know that I will be retiring in July. And so next month's meeting may be the last Planning Commission meeting during my tenure here. So I wanted to let the commissioners know that, and just give you the heads up on that.
Well, all the more reason it would be nice to see you. Now's the time when we move into item number 11, which is commissioner comments. Heck of a lead into that one, Fred, with a retirement announcement. And I'm now going to give any of the commissioners a chance to address the commission on general issues, and specifically if anybody wants to talk further about what they would like brought back in the future regarding the capital improvements project, aside from just our general plan consistency. Mr. Beaumont, your hand is raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Fred for all his help and his expertise while he was acting commissioner or acting director. And I was going to ask, when are you going to get to be the real director? But now I know the answer. So I'm sad to see you go, but I'm sure you'll be happy in retirement, and I wish you well. And thank you so much for all your help.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Aldrich, go ahead.
I want to piggyback on what Commissioner Beaumont said. I remember when you came back when the nut tree was going on, and I thought, oh, good, Fred is finally back. And I also thought maybe you would become our next director, but I wish you all the best in your retirement. Let me tell you, retirement is great. Thank you for all your service.
Thank you. That's very good news, too.
Commissioner Brecken, you have the floor. Go ahead, Wendy.
I would also like to thank Fred for being such an expert on everything, and it's going to be a big loss to the city when you retire, but I'm glad you're going to be able to. Another comment is I took a walk with a friend in Woodland through a development there that's relatively new. It's a couple of years old. They did a CFD there, and which is a community facilities district with Melrose. And they have a new elementary school. They had complete parks. In my 45-minute walk, I walked by 2 completed parks, and with bathrooms, water features, sports fields. And I guess, we were asked if we want to bring back the projects, for a quarterly projects report. And maybe that would be a good area to study as projects. And can we, what would it take to get bathrooms in our parks? I know that's a issue that many residents of Vacaville would like to see. I don't think it's civilized not to have bathrooms in parks. But also, what about other amenities, water features, etc.? So I guess that's my question is, can we bring that back for a study to maybe add more CIP projects, or at least study about it? Thank you.
And Fred, before I go on to Commissioner Lightfoot, I'm going to say that it might be good, especially because we do have several brand new members of the commission, at some point to do a study session on how projects and city improvements are funded, and how the Planning Commission's role and our ability to put conditions of approval on projects relates to the funding side, as well as just the land use and development code, and how some of the other cities in the area deal with that. And it's easy to volunteer you, since you don't actually have to do the work with that retirement thing, but that might be something to leave for your successor, is a commission interest in how funding occurs and how our role fits into that. Commissioner Lightfoot, you now have the floor.
Thank you very much. Second, thank you very much for your service, Fred. We'll have one more chance to say goodbye, it seems like. And the other thing, I just want to thank my fellow commissioners. I really enjoyed our conversation tonight, and I really appreciate all of your comments. I think it was very productive. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lightfoot. Any of the other commissioners wish to have comments? Commissioner Klein, Brandon, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to add to the chorus of praise, Fred. It's been not long enough that I've been able to work with you, but in the short time, I've really enjoyed the collegiality and your intellect and your wit. And I'm hoping that we haven't seen the last of you in some fashion, but I I understand the retirement's nice. Long time to go for me to get there, but and, you know, I wish you all the best in your retirement years.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I just want to add to the comment about the I did enjoy the conversation tonight, and I thank all of the staff for the work that was done to answer our questions and anticipate, and we got to field some concerns beforehand, and I thought that things went very well, and I'm looking forward to a great year.
Thank you, Commissioner Klein. One comment I want to leave us with, aside from I think people have echoed many of my thoughts, both on Fred and the great work that he's done for so many years here. By the way, Fred, there are many people that retire from being planners and come back fairly soon as consultants. So yeah, we may see you again anyway. That we've had quite a few discussions tonight where we didn't have a unanimous decision, but we did have a decision. And I'm very pleased with the way that the commission handled itself. It's the sort of thing I think our residents expect. And it was a disagreement that we still came to a conclusion on. So I'm pleased with the way that the commission worked together on that. I do have one item that I think also might be worth some sort of future discussion. We've seen both in the discussion under the Parks and Recreation Commission and some of when we looked at their plan, and then some discussion tonight about some of the equity issues that we face or that other communities face. And I don't think that the city has ever, in any sort of systematic manner, looked to see how our land use decisions, those that are considered beneficial or not, fit within, for example, the census tracts that have higher representations of people, whether it's single parent or non-English speaking or non-ESL, non-English as a first language, or any of those other categories that are looked at as impacted. I know a number of jurisdictions, whether it's MTC with their regional transportation plan, or even the Solano Transportation Authority with their countywide comprehensive plan, ended up doing an equity analysis to look at how their investments, whether it's of land use or of CIPs, actually relate to the distribution across the city of various groups. And I would hope that our general plan at some time, even if it doesn't right now, would have policies that direct us to make sure that our investments benefit the entire range of city residents. And we might want to start that by looking at how our actions in the past have impacted those residents. So that's more of a thought exercise for staff of something that probably would need to come from the council, but I think is worth looking at as a city so that we can make sure we are treating all of our residents fairly. And with that, I think since none of the other commissioners have hands up for commissioner comments, that brings us to our very last item, which is adjournment. We will now be adjourned until our meeting of Tuesday, June 15th, 2021. Good night, Vacaville, and thank you for being here with us.